Hi, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Thursday, February the 1st. Well, readers of the Arkansas Times, which comment on these videos, have made some complaints that we haven't been saying enough positive about Donald Trump. So let me say these two things. First of all, he said this morning that the TV ratings for his State of the Union address were the biggest in history. And second, he said their immigration bill is going to be tough, but it's going to be fair. Two other comments on this. Number one, he's wrong on both points. His ratings were not the highest in history. Several others have been higher. And two, his administration doesn't have an immigration bill yet. Aside from those small points, those are some good words about Donald Trump. The University of Arkansas Board of Trustees is considering a rule proposed by Chairman Ben Heineman, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette talked about today, that would essentially be a gag rule on the 10-member Board of Trustees. Only the chairman could speak for the board. Individual board members couldn't make their own requests for information from the campuses. They'd have to go through a board committee. And there'd be other restrictions on the kind of things that the board could say and do. It seems a First Amendment violation at a minimum. Heineman happens to have been in the minority when the board moved to get rid of Jeff Long and Brett Bielema. This is about football, I tend to believe, because that's mostly what gets talked about. David Pryor, you may remember, spoke openly and publicly as a member of the Board of Trustees about spending too much money on a football stadium expansion, which it just so happened Heineman was in favor of. Bad idea, but bad ideas sometimes go a long way. The UA is said to be modeling its rule after Arkansas State University. ASU, you may remember, isn't good enough to play in football, but they're good enough to imitate when it comes to gagging their board and violating open and accountable government. Elsewhere, today the State Medical Board is having a public hearing on a proposed rule to make it harder for doctors to prescribe opioid medicines as a means of reducing the abuse. A lot of patients turned up to say they fear it will make it harder for them to get drugs that help tremendous pain problems that they have. This is stemming in part, I think, from an ongoing investigation of a doctor in North Arkansas accused of prescribing excessive doses of opioids. Interesting development yesterday in Iowa that has meaning in Arkansas. A study in Iowa showed that state government's move to stop providing funding to Planned Parenthood and any other agency that also provided abortions as a part of their legal medical business could no longer qualify for Medicaid funding for family planning practices in the state of Iowa. They found that this cut participation in family planning in half in Iowa. This is not good for those who oppose abortion, because if you can't get birth control pills, you sometimes have unwanted pregnancies and you sometimes seek an abortion. We've learned also this week in Arkansas that the state government here, which has cut Planned Parenthood off Medicaid funding, has also issued a state ruling that says if Planned Parenthood were to serve a woman who no longer has Medicaid coverage and write a prescription for birth control pills, the state won't pay for her birth control pills either. This is a mean policy. It too is not anti-abortion by any means. It will encourage people to be in bad situations. Another bad decision by state government. Interesting finding yesterday from an FOI request to Little Rock Police Department, more on these take-home cars that the city provides for people on the force. 188 cars provided for Little Rock cops to drive home. 121 of them, almost two-thirds, go to outlying suburban cities, and they're nearly all driven by white officers. We have a majority white police force and a majority black city, and the majority of benefits that encourage people to live outside the city go to white officers. It does tend to contribute to a feeling that you can't always find trust among the police force that enforce the laws in inner city neighborhoods, fair or foul. That is the situation. Also today, there's news of a Trump administration appointee, another one raising questions. He happens to be from Arkansas. He's going to be head of the National Center for Education Statistics. Seems like a cut and dried kind of job, but it has some political overtones when statistics are used to support agendas in education, be they charter schools, choice, that sort of thing. Supposedly it's just a statistical agency. Lynn Woodworth is his name. He happens to be working currently at a right-wing think tank at Stanford. And he has education backing from the Education Reform Unit at the University of Arkansas, which was financed by the Waltons to promote the school choice agenda. We're sure he'll be a fair player in that job by none other than Jay Green of where else? The Education Reform Unit at the University of Arkansas. Here's a good story. Court rulings are developing that says public officials cannot block people from their social media accounts, their Facebook and Twitter accounts. It's a violation of the First Amendment. This happened in Virginia. There have been complaints made about Little Rock police officials blocking people. Numbers of state legislators and state officials block people from Facebook. There's a GoFundMe account underway on Facebook to raise money for a lawsuit against Jason RAPERT, one of our favorite legislators, who loves to block people who criticize him. They are supposedly serving citizens. They're not serving them all if they let some comment and not others. This also reminds us of politicians like once Governor Mike Huckabee when he was governor, and now Senator Tom Cotton, who refused to provide publicly financed services to press they don't like. Cotton's office won't send news releases to the Arkansas Times, for example. Is that a First Amendment violation? Perhaps so, but we've got other fish to fry. And finally, this little local controversy. There's a local radio station, if you don't listen to drive time radio, you might not know, called The Buzz, which every year during NCAA basketball time has something called the Babe Bracket, and they use women who work for local TV stations and have people vote on which is the most attractive, essentially. Well, a news director of KARK, our friend and news partner Austin Kellerman, says it's time to end the Babe Bracket. Objectifies women. They should be judged on their merits, their abilities, their brains, and not just on how they look. Some of the women agree, but some women are afraid to say anything because they don't want to put their stations in a bad light. Austin Kellerman, of course, is right. Maybe we ought to have a hunk magnet. I don't think any of the boys over at the Buzz would win. Interestingly enough, their listeners are overwhelmingly in favor of continuing this. You can be sure that most of them are men, not women. I'm resisting. You do too. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.